Hello everyone and welcome to our channel. Now, the battle reports will return soon enough, but we're prepping for 10th, we don't have all the stuff to be able to play yet, so the battle reports will come soon. However, today we're going to be covering the book The Lion, the Son of the Forest by Mike Brooks. Now this video is essentially a book review, sort of like a book club, more relaxing, more talking about what happens in the book, overall implications, how the book is written, stuff like that, just going over it and just talking about it. Now, overall, my review for overall the book is, it is a great, well-written book. It is everything you could want and more. It deals heavily into the character. This is like a second origin story for him, and add a lot of themes and things and aspects of the book, but overall, it is a good book. Lots of story, lots of character, a lot of good action scenes, and a lot of peering into the Lion as a character, as well as the interesting reactions of the world around him. Now, for me personally, the one Primarch I really want to come back is Ferrus Manus, because it would be very interesting to see him when he has no knowledge of the Emperor's death and stuff, coming back and just being culture shocked into the New World and stuff, and all the things that happen around it. However, the Lion is a close second, because he left, he was defeated shortly after the Horus Heresy ended, and so he is very fresh in his mind, has very little idea of what has happened and what is going on, and so he's a very good close second for story beats, how the story will go, the interesting developments and stuff like that. So as a story, he's a very good character to bring into this universe. Now, I'll basically recount the entire plot and beats of the book before going into more detail. So, as it begins, the book starts off exactly how you would want it to. Straight to the point with the Lion. Exactly, it's the very first thing you see and come across. It's him slowly waking up, slowly having his memories come to mind. He is sort of in a fog at the start, going throughout it. He appears in a forest, going through it. He eventually finds what is overall hinted at as the Emperor, but it's just an old, wizened man on a boat and stuff. He tries to reach out to him, but is called back by a Watcher, which is interesting because Watchers really don't talk, or a short, cloaked person. And then after some talking back and forth, or as best talking as it can be, the Watcher tells him to just follow his instincts. And then the Lion just does that. He keeps going out, walking around, and detects some sort of beast or something twisted. He follows that scent, and he ends up on a different planet, in a different world. And he pretty much is having his second origin story, where he is basically, back at the beginning. He's alone on a hostile planet. And he starts off coming across some locals who are about to get eaten by some monsters. And it's one of the first fight scenes where he fights, barely wins, by the way, which is interesting, and defeats these two chaos-corrupted beasts. If he wasn't armored, he probably would have died, which is a little jarring, since when he was younger, he just slaughtered beasts left and right. But I assume it's because he was a hunter back then, and he chose his marks and timing carefully. He just charged in against a difficult situation in this one. But anyway, the people are thankful. They lead him to their camp. The camp is all the survivors of this planet, or scattered survivors. And then the Lion comes across one of his fallen, who immediately starts shooting him in the face, which does absolutely nothing to the Lion, so he just casually teleports towards him. Well, not teleports, but almost instantly, because of how fast they move. Knocked him down, is about to kill him, but the back talk from the Fallen immediately makes the Lion rethink killing him long enough for, the Fallen to get out of being murdered. After some talking back and forth, they really go over the Fallen's view of what happened at Caliban, which is pretty interesting to see, because before this, every vision or every bit of the Fallen that we've ever seen, they've always been villains, evil, chaos, corrupted and stuff. This is the first time we see truly that there's someone who is not chaos corrupted, who's just wrong place, wrong time, which is very common in 40k. And then after conversing on it, I'll get into more detail of that later. Eventually, the Lion decides to, save everybody, because he's just going to stick to his instincts, and he's going to do what he was created to do, save people. So him with his son, his fallen, I'm terrible with names, I can't recall him. He's the first fallen he meets. Go into the Fortress Monastery. Now, interestingly, it is a Blood Angel successor chapter who gets destroyed by some very, very capable Astartes traders. One is a Fallen who reminds me a lot of Cyphers. Like, this interesting thing is that they show a lot of good gunplay in this book. Like, guns are used very well, especially with this character. Like shooting joints, shooting the exact spots that you need to. Very well done, very interesting. Makes the gun fu seem pretty cool in this, and better than melee weapons. Anyway, so when the Lion gets there, it's our first major actions thing. Going from the courtyard, defeating cultists, to getting into the fortress. And it's a very interesting fight scene, because the Lion has no weapons. He just has his armor and his fists, and he just immediately beats down an entire squad of the best Chaos Marines that the Lord has. And there's this one single moment in the fight that's just absolutely ridiculous, overpowered. The leader of the war band has a Thunderhammer and charges and swings right at the Lion. And the Lion just casually backhands the Thunderhammer while it is in mid-swing and breaks it, the hammerhead, off the shaft. Then grabs the guy, lifts him up, and cracks his back and just tosses him over. It's ridiculous. And then it gets very interesting because, as far as I can tell, it's not directly said. The book is a little obtuse in it, but as far as I can tell, two Obliterators teleport in and just start fighting against the Lion. The Lion has to do some retreats, and it's pretty... the fight makes sense. That's one thing I will give about this book. All the fights make a lot of sense in the way they flow and what happens in them. Pretty interestingly. And so he's ended up running from them, temporarily retreating to get into I don't remember what the chapter was, but this Blood Angel successor chapter's armory. And he's looking through, and all the weapons have been looted. Of course, the warband goes for the important stuff. And he's looking for everything, going through the racks of weapons, dodging all sorts of fire, melta, and stuff like that. Getting into fisticuffs with them a few times, and just barely getting his head blown off by a melta, or what I assume to be a melta. A lot is implied in Warhammer, interestingly. And so, eventually, he comes across his sword, Fealty, I believe it's called. Yeah, I remember that name. It just happens to be a sword and a stone between two trees that in a forest that just appears there. You're going to see this in the book. A lot of themes of it, well, it's, I don't know how to pronounce it right. Arthurian? Arthur, King Arthur and stuff, whatever that is. But it's very overt. But it also shows sort of like he's being guided, he's being lifted. It's like, it's no coincidence that the Lion just magically wakes up at this moment. It's like he's being led. So, and so he gets his sword and then immediately absolutely obliterates the Obliterators. Easily. He helps his fallen son, who is, well, getting destroyed by a Psyker at the moment when he defeats those things, and he immediately just slaughters it. The fight overall, very good. Made a lot of sense with the flow. No Deus Ex kind of stuff. And then, essentially, the Lion goes through, checks out the entire place, clears it out from some subplots. Essentially, the warband, Thousand Eyes, I believe it was, or something like that. Completely took the Blood Angels that were there, or Blood Angel successors, and was mutating them or stuff, and the Lion just puts them out of their misery. This is one thing I do like with a lot of the war bands. So when I come across these war bands in literature or any of the books and stuff, essentially, for the Imperium and stuff, it's one of their most towering days. It's one of these huge monumental challenges or this life-changing event. But for all these war bands, it's just a Tuesday. The war bands is just going on its merry way, conducting experiments and moving on, and then the Lion just awoken and he's trying to save everything and straight true to his purpose. But, I mean, some might say it's just like a weird plot point that's brought up and never brought again. I say it like adds like more character to the warband, that there's a past behind them, and there's stuff in the future. It's like this random stuff from even a Night Lord's Legion warband I once read on from the Carcharodons. They were just doing their stuff, and like the book ended with them just like, all right, time to find a new leader and stuff, and they moved on and things like that. So I do like that, in keeping with it, that the warbands are, well, they have their own lives to deal with and their own goals that are beyond what is happening in the main character's books. So anyway, So moving on from that, afterwards, the Lion essentially takes over the whole planet. The people rise up and are able to take back the main cities. They're able to take over the gun arrays, the communications, and stuff like that. And yeah, the Lion has successfully retaken a world by himself. And after that, shortly afterwards, he detects something calling to him. So him and his bodyguard, the one Fallen he has, and 10 very lucky people who are only alive because their leader, a woman, was obstinate and wanted to continue to guard him. Because if they didn't go with him, they'd all be dead. So Lion follows his instincts. He ends up finding himself on a desert world, where he meets the local populace. They're spooked, but after a psyker tests him, they believe his story. Afterwards, then, nothing of note there except essentially his fallen son goes out and finds a few other fallen. And then they meet up with the Lion, and he essentially recruits them, convinces them. But there's one thing I noticed in this book that doesn't make sense is the Lion keeps putting himself in situations where he could easily die, which makes no sense, like intentionally weakening himself. He came out to meet these new Fallen that he had never met before, who last time they met the Lion was slaughtering them. And he came to them without any armor or anything like that. So like that's just... that made no sense to do. It's just like... it was out of character, I believe. I mean, like, when he did that, he did second guess himself. It's not like he didn't figure it out that was a dumb idea afterwards, but he did in the first place. But he did like mention it to himself that maybe I shouldn't have done that, and he does something similar again later. But off from that, there's an interesting thing. So he gets his plasma pistol here, and it's a very interesting one because the leaders there say it's a plasma pistol that the Emperor left on this planet a long time ago. However, there's no record of him ever showing up, but that's an interesting implication. A relic of the Emperor went to some random planet, they had it, never did anything with it, and they were able to hold it and keep it for that long. So, like, a little suspicious there. But it kind of just shows that, the Lion is definitely being guided, and the Emperor is doing things and dropping things off. This probably was done a long time ago, or maybe it wasn't the Emperor, it's just someone worked for the Emperor and dropped off there. But this poor plasma pistol, all the plasma pistol does in this book is show that enemies have shields. That's it. It's the only reason for it. Every time it fires, it kills nothing, and it just finds out that the enemy have shields. However, then after this, we get into one of the better space battles that are in generally in the book. So one thing with space battles is they're a bit hard to describe the overall appearance of the book. And this one actually was pretty well. I was probably able to keep up with like 60 to 70% of what was going on and got a basic understanding of it. There's some things, some movements described and flanking and stuff went over my head. But as far as this goes, it was a good space battle. And once again, I don't know if this is like a nitpick, but it's something I noticed is that every big space battle that I've seen so far is always against Khorne. Directly against Khorne, Khornite, Khorne followers, or something like this. So in this battle, while the warband is led by a Fallen, who is a follower of Tzeentch, clearly, a Khornate, a leader, was leading this one. And the only reason I bring this up is because Khorne is a very easy enemy to write when it comes to space battles, because all they do is charge directly forward and get as close as they can to shoot, ram, and board. That's it. Like, if it was anything else, the Lion would have been screwed. But it'd be very interesting to see, like, what would a Slaaneshi warband, how would they handle a space battle? Tzeentch, Nurgle, I think, pretty much would do the exact same thing as Khorne, but it's just so they can get near it and infect. But it was a very simple one to write. The enemy just rushes forward, shoots any teammates that are getting out of line. Lion makes some comments to this is just like how Angron was, but no one knew who he was talking about except for the Fallen that were with him. And apart from that, it was a simple space battle, but this is actually one of the best fights in the book happens right here. The Khornate Lord knows that the Lion is there. They just had this whole meeting with the other warbands, and they found out that the Lion is actually on this planet. And this Khornate Berserker in Terminator armor, knowing that one of the Emperor's Primarchs is there, teleports onto the bridge with 4 others to fight him. It's like, all right, you're brave. And it's actually a really good fight with some unintentionally funny stuff. So immediately the lion just destroys one, but the moment he just basically how the lion does it, he just knocks him over and stabs through him, then immediately gets knocked over by a power fist, cracks his plates and ribs. And it's a very interesting fight. It's a lot of good back and forth. It's well described, has some funny moments. I'll get into more detail of that later, but moving on from this little plot point, after the battle, the next big thing that happens is essentially the lion gathers up his forces, looks for more fallen, finds a few. His fallen son goes out, finds some more on another planet. They group up. Then they go find some more fallen who are acting as space pirates. There's some uniqueness to them in their kit and gear, but overall they sort of blend together as characters. Then after that, they go back to the first planet that the lion was from, and basically the population was wiped out again, and then there's huge, castle... the description kind of eluded me. I didn't know if it was floating in air or if it was just on the ground. All the bones of the people were made into a monument. And so it goes to the end game where the lion just teleports or casually walks into the enemy's main base. That ability alone makes the lion one of the most dangerous enemies in the or beings in the entire 40k universe, because he can just ignore all defenses, all tracking, all anything, and just show up randomly where he needs to. And man, that's a very powerful and useful ability. And so basically he shows up to the main boss. Him and his fallen beat the crap out of everyone in his way. He confronts the main boss, which hits him with a very interesting plot twist of what he wants to do. And it's very interesting because his son, the fallen that's there, the main enemy, the main antagonist of the book, is loyal to the Emperor in a twisted way. And so his overall plan is the Emperor must die, which also, coincidentally, is Cypher's plan as well. However, this Fallen has the idea that, all right, I just need someone who can get close to the Emperor. So he was looking for a great champion or something that could possibly be let in to have an audience with the Emperor. He's wrong on that. The Custodians would never let anyone nearby except for his sons. There is no one who could earn any honor big enough to get near Big E. And so, after that happens, the Fallen explains his plan is to possess the lion, control him, but leave enough of the lion there to be able to be indistinguishable, get onto Terra, get to the Emperor, and then slay him. And just to release him into the warp so he can be free of his mortal coil and beat the Dark Gods for good. However, in the end, the lion defeats him with the help of his sons. The sons hit his spell MacGuffin thingy. There's blowback onto him. He turns into a warp monster. His best aide stabs him in the back, and then the lion finishes him off. And then it's just the wrap-up, where the Blood Angels come, hearing the siren call of the lion, because this is a little bit dangerous. When I was reading this, is this really a smart idea? It's basically the lion was broadcasting that he's alive, and he's there in this system. In Nihilus, by the way, where it's hard to traverse. It's you're kind of inviting a lot of bad people at that rate. But luckily, the Blood Angels show up. And honestly, it was a very good moment because the lion immediately took issue with Dante wearing Sanguinius' face. And that was the first thing that happened. And so, the Blood Angels, got spooked or readied themselves because that... outburst from the lion was a bit too much for them, but Dante calmed everyone down and explained everything. And then Dante told the lion that Guilliman lives and stuff like that, and so he's fine. And yeah, and those are the major plot points. And then now let's get into some more detail with characters and stuff. That took a while. It was a long book. Now, let's talk about how the lion awakens. From the very beginning, well, we know and have been known from codexes that the lion has been asleep on board the rock for a long time, tended to by the Watchers. Well, in this, he just wakes up in a forest, and so this kind of seems that it implies that the Watchers sort of work with the Emperor. All the things that happen in the book imply the Emperor is helping him, guiding him, and lifting him towards awakening and prepping him for work. And apparently the Lion has a new power, the ability to rift walk, I guess. And so, very interesting how it goes. But as far as the Lion awakens, he wakes up in a forest like his old Caliban, and wherever he goes, he finds trouble or enemies, which is pretty cool. And his character has changed. So at the end of the Horus Heresy, I know that he was a very stubborn and very like shoot first, ask questions never. But he began to second guess himself or question his methods and ways at the end of the Horus Heresy, and then the whole thing with Caliban happened. And then when he's in this, his character, he really analyzes himself and wonders that maybe he's just not good enough, or he's just causing too much trouble, or the way he's been going about things is wrong, or who is he to judge with all this stuff, especially after meeting his first Fallen and the explanation of what happened on Caliban on their side and stuff. It made him really see that it's just like the Lion made a mistake, and that he needs to judge for himself all his sons, which does become something. And so from this point on, after meeting his first Fallen, that he decides that he will judge personally every single Fallen and find out if they're corrupt themselves. And that's a pretty big shift from who he was. And this is one thing I'm liking about the Primarchs returning. It's like the Primarchs in the Horus Heresy are like their youthful teenage selves. But when they come into 40K, they are older, wiser, and most importantly, broken in one way or another. And they have to deal with these issues and stuff. It's like the tagline of the book is the Lion saying that I failed my father, I failed my brothers, I will not fail my sons. That's a big character leap and a character change. It's more like not necessarily maturing, but this character has gone through great trauma and great horror, and he's trying to make the most of it and be better from it. And so that's interesting and nice to see, especially when it's well done and has now changed the entire focus of his character. Now, apart from trying to do what his purpose was, which is save everyone or protect people, is also to make amends for the evil that he has done, or what he has done to his sons and the mistakes he has made. And then moving on from that, this book is truly like a second origin story. Far more detailed than the origin stories of others, but very cool, very interesting. It hits a lot of good beats. We get to see the Lion flex and show off what he is made out of and who he is. And yeah, it's a good story. It has everything you would want in it. And overall, the plot, there really is no like Deus Ex Machina or just strange things happening here and there. It's just like the story is very natural. It just starts with a Lion awakening and him just following his instincts, and then defeating the enemies that are in front of him, and then just conquering the planet naturally, and then following his instincts again. It's like it's just cause and effect. It just escalates to more and more until finally dealing with another one of his Fallen who have gone for chaos. And so nothing seems contrived throughout the book. Nothing seems just randomly thrown in. I mean, there are the subplots and stuff like that with the warband and stuff like that, but that makes it seem like that warband has been there for a while. They all have their own priorities and things like that. And yeah, it was a good book, and the plot feels natural. Alright, now going into the analysis of the characters, or ones that stand out. Unfortunately, I'm terrible with names. I'm really terrible. And I've gone over the Lion, essentially, already, but let's talk about the first Fallen he starts with. I can't recall his name. I think it starts with a Z or something. Yeah, the guy he shoots at first. Or the guy that shoots at the Lion immediately. He essentially is... Well, he's prominent. He has a lot of places in the book. We get to hear a lot of his thoughts. But as a character, he's used to give the backstory of what happened on Caliban, to show like the perspective of the Fallen, what they have done, what they've been doing, how they lived. Using this character, we're able to find out that they essentially all meet each other, chaos corrupted or loyal to humanity, not necessarily the Imperium, and they just don't interfere with each other. It's very interesting where essentially what is equivalent of a loyalist Fallen and a chaos corrupted loyalist can just get along. That was actually kind of interesting. And apart from that, he gives the story of Caliban. He's kind of used as linchpin to help push the Lion into his current actions. And also, the Lion had no memories of who he was until he saw the Dark Angel symbol and stuff, and all was coming back to him. So that's interesting. So his mind was in a fog and then released upon seeing things. And yeah, and this Fallen is pretty interesting. He wields pistols and stuff. I have not much to say onto him. He's mostly used as a foil. He is a bit witty. He's interesting. He's been around for a very long time. I think it was like 300 or 400 years. He's been avoiding the Dark Angels, and in that whole time, he's done what he could to help people while hiding. And immediately shoots at the Lion, but after talking to the Lion, immediately sort of like, you know what? I'll swear to him and I'll follow him. So it's like pretty big turnaround. Pretty interesting there. And then moving on to the other Fallen. The other Fallen just... to me, they're all kind of the same-ish. They all follow the same character archetype. There are a few noticeable differences. There's one that's a swordsman, who's really good with a swordsman. There's one that wears a mask constantly, and no one knows what his face is like. There's one that is a librarian, very powerful one that's missing an arm. And there's a guy with a jump pack and stuff. And, there's one with a pair of Terminator armor. What was it? Not Alaris. The really old one with the other weird-shaped shoulder pads. But basically, these are the only ones that were really noteworthy. There are a bunch of others, but nothing that really distinguishes themselves. Yeah, I'm pointing them out by their war gear, not by their personalities or stuff like that. Like, there's some talking back and forth, some debates over what to do with the Lion. But because there's a bunch of them, they sort of all blend in together. Apart from their war gear, they have a few witty comments here and things they say here and there, but there's not much distinction or real interest among them. They're mostly just Dark Angels and a warband of ragtag fighters. That's pretty much it. All right, moving on. Interestingly, all the main enemies or bad guys are way more interesting and way more memorable than the Fallen. So, first off, is the leader of the warband Thousand Eyes? Yeah, I can remember that name. I don't remember his name, though. Essentially, he's the warlord, and he's interestingly described as his face and head constantly being on fire, but not burning him. And so, essentially, his character stands out very much. He seems to be very emotional, not negatively, but like expressive. Enigmatic, charismatic, because one thing I noticed that all Chaos Warbands is, they're all led by whoever can talk the best, or whoever can get everyone to like them. That's what I noticed, is like they're led by charisma, not by order. And so he himself, he's an interesting character. He keeps everyone in place. He's a very powerful psyker, that's noted by the ability to stop bullets and people in midair, which would have been very useful in one of the final fights if he decided to fight with everyone else instead of being alone in a corner. And yeah, he's memorable because he has interesting plans. He's pushing everything along. He's second-guessing everything, but then again, he has a teammate of his, or another Fallen, who helps keep him in line. And he seems like a very interesting, charismatic character. Apart from the fact he's wickedly evil, butchers entire populations, massacres people, and it's like... yeah, he's an interesting character, but like, he's a likable character. Apart from the fact that he's evil. The next one is another Fallen that follows in the main warband, and I can't remember his name, but he's a really good gunman, and he's very experienced, like ridiculously experienced. In the first fight he is in, he's just chilling out behind cover while enemies are shooting at him, or chapter serfs, and another Chaos Marine asks him, what is he doing? He's like, he's just waiting for them to start to reload, that they're spamming all their bullets, and so once they stop firing, he'll rush in, and he did. As soon as they stopped firing, it was to reload because they did spam their bullets. He just rushed in and just wiped them out in just a matter of moments. And he had some duels against the Chaos Khorne Berserker commander. And surprisingly, it was like a very good way to fight. He actually fought two Terminators. Against the captain, the Berserker captain, he was able to nearly kill him. And if it wasn't for the... he would have killed him. But the... warband leader of the Thousand Eyes intervened and stopped his bullet from blowing out the Khorne Berserker's brains. He would have killed him, and he was in Terminator armor. And And in his first showing, after massacring those chapter serfs, he goes off against him and another go off against a Terminator from Blood Angel's successor, and he defeats it by waiting for the right moment to shoot in between the joints on the Terminator armor very accurately, very quickly. So it's like he's very experienced. He knows exactly what to do. He's not tainted by chaos, but he was fine with working with chaos. It's I don't know, he's a pretty interesting character because this is the weird thing. He's like loyal to, in the end, he becomes loyal to the Lion and sort of loyal to mankind, but he's also loyal to his friend, which is the leader of the war band. Honestly, Chaos is very interesting because they can have some of the most interesting dynamic characters if they're done right. Like, I've yet to hear of a charismatic Chaos Khorne worshiper. But all these war bands are led by very interesting characters. The way they talk, the way they walk, their goals, the way they handle things. They're always interesting to read. And finally, the other two other memorable characters is the Khorne Berserker Captain. He's in it for a short period of time, but he is pure. Yeah, he. How do I put it? It's interesting because it's portrayed as like there's a switch, like he's talking normally, like he's thinking and debating with others in this council room, and then like he gets pissed at one guy talking to him, and then it's like in a moment he sort of gets into a listless lull, and then rages as a berserker trying to kill the second command, which is immediately stopped. And then he faces charges against the Lion, no fear, sort of kind of messed up a bit. It's kind of funny because he's sort of I'll get into it in the fight part, but man, he's a distinctly noticeable character. He's interesting because he's a Khorne Berserker who, well, he's just super brave. And it's very interesting to see how the fights work. I mean, he's stereotypical, but he's well done. Yeah, he's just a cookie-cutter Chaos Terminator Khorne Berserker, but he's done well and he's cool. And then finally, I don't know what place he's in. He's like third in command-ish or something, but basically it's a Slaanesh Chaos cultist, or Chaos Marine, who has a magical sword that allows him, as long as he's holding onto the sword, he can take any sort of wound and regenerate from it, even beheadings. And that's pretty cool. As a character, he's just sort of in the background. He's in it for a little bit. He's in towards the beginning, sometimes in the middle, and in the end. But that's about it. But it's just like, yeah, it's a cool weapon, cool guy. Yeah. And that's about it for all the characters, really, that stood out to me. I mean, there are dozens of characters throughout this, but they're only in it for short periods of time, where, like, the ship captains, or the planet governors, or this Mechanicus guy who helps on the first planet. He's given a name. He helps do stuff. He sets everything up for taking back the gun platforms, and then you never hear of him again. Alright, now, time for fight scenes. I'm going to go over all of them, including the final one against the demon. So, in the first fight scene, which is against the beasts. Now, this one actually wasn't a good... Well, it took me out of it. Okay, so look, the Lion in his youth fought against all manners of chaos-corrupted beasts and hunted them, ate them, killed them, whatever. And in this, he is nearly defeated. I mean, by defeated, I mean the big creature, giant teeth, wraps its entire jaw around his arm and crunches down, cracking his armor. If he didn't have armor, he would have lost his arm. I mean, seriously. It's kind of... that took me out of it a bit, because, like... there's no way the Lion should have had any trouble. But I can kind of see that when he was younger, as a hunter, he would take fights that he knew he could win, or ambush, or stuff like this. In this case, he was trying to save people, so he went into a very not strategic or advantageous fight in order to win. But he ends up defeating them entirely, and saves the incredibly spooked and freaked out people. And then the second fight. This fight felt sort of like a small mini-movie. It was in the fortress. It had several parts. First was in the courtyard, then in the main castle area or fortress, and then throughout the armory. Essentially what's happening is, he is sneaking into the fortress with the one fallen. They're getting through, and You come across a bunch of cultists, and it's described wonderfully how he does it. Basically, with no weapons, just his fists and stuff, he just starts curb stomping tons of cultists and just crushing them left and right, beating them up, and then the fallen guy coming behind him and finishing off any that get behind him or anything like that. Very nice, very cool fight. Like it. Then after that, the third fight was in space, and the space battle was described pretty well. It's just the enemy rushed at them, and they just flanked them and just kept shooting them. But it was the melee fight in with the Coronate Terminator commander. When he teleported in, he had 4 others with a whole host of weapons like great axe, great chain axe, lightning claws, power fist. The main guy had I believe it was a power sword and a chain fist. And so essentially, the fight was pretty cool because they immediately they rushed close as they could and teleported onto the bridge. Everyone evacuated the bridge except the Lion and the Fallen. One Fallen guy who was with him. The Lion steps up, and the first one to charge up was, I believe, was the Great Axe guy, I think. And then the Lion just tackles him into the ground and just stabs straight through him, killing him instantly with his sword. And then he immediately gets hit on the side from a Terminator with a power fist, knocking him over and stuff. And then, of course, the main Chaos Berserker comes in, can't land a single blow onto the Lion. Lion is dodging, blocking, deflecting. And funnily enough, what happens is he gets knocked over onto a control panel, the Coronate Berserker, and he just gets stuck there. The whole panel gets crushed into the ground, he's stuck there, and he spends a good portion of the fight just trying to stand back up. And funnily enough, as he's doing this, the Lion goes back and fights the other ones. And so how the Lion gets away with this is the Berserkers are really going berserk. And so he sort of pushes one into another and they hit each other. And then 2 of the Berserkers just start killing each other. A Lightning Claw Terminator and I think just a Power Fist Terminator just going at it. Then the Lion 1v1 this other Chaos Terminator, which, this one had a great chain axe, yeah. And so was able to disarm him, kill him, and then throw the chain axe. And the chain axe, this was the funny part, is as their commander was getting up and getting off the panel, he immediately gets hit in the back with a chain axe and falls back onto it. So that was funny. Unintentionally funny, but funny. Then right after that, essentially what happened was, of course, the Lion then comes up, duels the commander, eventually defeats him. A pretty cool, pretty interesting battle, wielding the sword and the chain fist. And the Lion just essentially picks him apart and cuts him down. And then lastly, the final guy was the 2 Khorne Berserkers that were killing each other. One of them killed the other. Last survivor was Lightning Claws, but his helmet was gone. And so the Fallen that was with him just finished him off by shooting him in the head. Yeah. Oh, and forgot to mention this, but when the fight started, the Lion immediately took out his plasma pistol and fired at them, which was immediately blocked by their shields. So, yeah. Fourth fight. I mean, there have been small duels throughout this thing here and there, collecting the Fallen and stuff, but the fourth big fight was the finale, essentially. There's really 2 finales, story-wise, and, the big bad. So the big bad fight was the Lion and his Fallen basically teleported into the fortress of the first planet they were on to face the big bad, and all of his Chaos Marines that were still loyal, as well as Beastmen. Beastmen make a showing here. Wow, didn't expect them. And the Beastmen were no trouble. They were just stomped over, so there's no real mentioning there, except Beastmen are back in 40k. Then, essentially, the Lion and his Fallen meet against the enemy Warlord and his Chaos Marines, and they split. And so when the fight begins, the Lion splits from his Fallen and chases after the Warband leader, and then his Fallen fight against the Chaos Marines. And surprisingly, there were no casualties. I mean, they got beat into the ground, but none of them died. And they faced off against that immortal Slaaneshi Chaos Marine, and they defeated him by cutting off his hands, which then separated the sword from his body, and so he could die. Yeah, catch right there. So what you do is you chain the sword to your body or armor so that you can always get it back. Yeah, so that was kind of funny. And then then the Lion chases off against the Warlord, and the Warlord defeats him with psychic power, which I thought the Lion would have learned from when he fought Luther. That psychic might really does stop him. And essentially, the Lion was then chained up with iron chains that were enchanted, so he couldn't break them. And then the Fallen gives his spiel about what he wants to do. The Lion is surprised because, well, he didn't know that the Emperor would still be alive or stuff like that. Or, if you can call it alive. And then the fight pretty much is just a 1v1. His Fallen come into the room, open fire, break the enchantment that's holding him. The Lion goes off against the main war boss. The war boss gets stabbed in the back by his aide because the war boss essentially gets turned into as far as I can tell, a chaos spawn. Then the Lion finishes him off, has some parting words with the warband leader Second as he's dying, because he was a loyal son essentially in the end. And yeah, and that was the fourth fight. And now the final fight, which was really cool-ish. I don't know. It's just the only negatives is that some brothers were not represented as much as others. So basically, he goes back into this forest vision thingy, and he finds this room where he was warned not to enter in the earlier part of the book. So he decides, you know what, might as well do it now. He enters, and he's confronted with Leman Russ, and surprisingly, the Lion is really happy to see him. And then the Russ immediately starts trying to fight him. So the Lion's like, alright, fine, he'll never be persuaded otherwise. And so in the fight, all of a sudden, Russ turns into Horus, and the Lion can't believe it. And then essentially what happens is that this person is not his brothers. And he only officially recognized that after the creature turned into Magnus and then punched him, in which the Lion remarked, yeah, you were definitely not Magnus, because he could not punch this hard. Paraphrasing, but that's basically how he went. And so what you have is this very cool battle of where the Lion essentially meets a version of each and every one of his brothers fighting him. From Dorn, Fulgrim, Perturabo, all that stuff, and they all chew him out, or as far as I can tell, this was some sort of demon that was meant to like mentally break your opponent as well, because essentially hit him with people who he has issues with or he has essentially failed. So he's really sad about that. He deals with it, and he eventually defeats it, but it goes to Conrad, and that's actually the longest part of this fight, is where he's arguing with, it's not really Conrad, but it's close enough. It's like it's a demon that really knows all his brothers well enough to be able to mimic them, and has a pretty quick, intense fight with Conrad, this demon Conrad. And a lot of good back and forth, some quips, and so as like it also kind of helps put another perspective on, is Conrad really evil? Because I know some argue that his legion did horrible things to a few thousand people and they would get an entire planet to surrender, and so you could say that they were the most moral legion because they only killed like 2,000 people and got an entire planet, whereas other legions would just go into huge war, destroy huge portions of the land, infrastructure, stuff, kill millions of people in order to take over a planet. But Conrad and stuff had the least amount of bloodshed. And so when this fake Conrad was asking, why are you a hero when I'm not, when we use similar methods? And then the Lion's response, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Because you did things, dang, I can't remember what exactly it said, but basically said that Conrad did horrible things even when he was told not to. And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's pretty much a good point. And then it finally ended with the Lion claiming a shield after defeating that demon, and what looked like a message from the Emperor with an image of a spear and a cup, which outside of it I heard that some people believe that belonged to Sanguinius, and the Emperor's trying to tell him to do something with Sanguinius, but that's not a part of the book, but interesting things are implied there. And then finally, yeah, that's the final fight. As far as anything stand out, there were some funny moments, but all the fights were really well described. You could easily envision them in your mind, and you could have a lot of fun reading them. So, yeah, that's actually a really good job on Mike Brooks. Alright, back to the second fight. I forgot to mention it, but there was a lot more in the second fight. I just glossed over. I just realized I skipped it. So, going back to the second fight. After he beat the cultists into the ground and he faced off against, in the main castle area or fortress, against the Chaos Marines, it went in a very odd way. I will say, because when he opened the doors and saw them, they were all calling out to him, asking him to reveal himself or explain who he was. I was like, that's kind of odd. I'm surprised that the Marines didn't just immediately start shooting at him from the other side. They had distance advantage there, which they immediately lost because the Lion just leapt straight into them and just beat them into the ground, just crushed their heads and stuff like that. The fight with the Obliterators was actually pretty good because it was like this big back and forth of him dealing with these hulking beasts that are just throwing him left and right, and him scrambling for a weapon in the armories and stuff, and him dodging their bullets and weapons and stuff. Really cool, really fun, a really well-written fight. And the very end, him dispatching them and dealing with the Chaos Lord at the very end, which is kind of funny because, and this was probably one of the funny parts of the book, is when the Lion asks the Warlord before his fallen son slaughters him, he asks him, "What malady have you put on me?" Because the Lion is slower, weaker, he feels it. And then when he shows his face to the Chaos Lord, the Chaos Lord immediately starts buttering himself up, immediately refers to the Lion as Lord. Yeah, I saw that. And so the Chaos Lord says, "My lord, you got old." And then started laughing. And so then the Fallen just put him out of his misery. And so that's a sad thing for him. So the Lion is somewhat physically weaker. I'm sure he'll get back into it soon enough. But yeah, and that was all the fights. Memorable moments and lore. Seeing the Emperor, or what, I mean, we kind of assume it's the Emperor. I don't know, it could be Malcador, who knows. The Emperor inside this forest-like warp thing, trying to communicate with the Lion, showing him things and such and such. It kind of interesting. This could be a fragment of him, or could be a realm that the Emperor controls in the warp that the Lion goes into and then goes out of elsewhere. Sort of like how the regular teleportation works. You go into the warp and then you pop out elsewhere. And then kind of the overall awakening and the Lion talking with a Watcher. That's kind of interesting. I didn't know they could talk, and they never have really before. But it sort of shows the way the Watcher was talking, what he referred to, probably showed that he is at least aligned with the Emperor. So let's go there. The other memorable moments, the first fight without weapons was pretty cool. I mean, just a straight up beat down with fists. Seeing the Battle of Caliban described, pretty cool how that went. The fight on the bridge was probably for me, it's one of the highlights of the book. It's just the way the Khorne Berserkers were fighting and how the battle was, and how the main leader was getting knocked over repeatedly onto the ground because of weapons flying and stuff like that. That was funny. Beastmen, they were memorable because I recall them being in fantasy. Just randomly started showing up. I know people get mutated into things, but like specifically called beastmen and being beast-like with shamans that they mentioned. Okay. Another memorable thing is that poor plasma pistol, whose only existence was to showcase that they had force fields. That did not work on the final Terminator, whose head got blown up by the Fallen. Alright. And then the fight at the end against the demon. So the only negative about it is that some brothers were able to talk and converse more than others, and some only had a single line to give. Yeah. And apart from that, I got to see a lot of interesting moments from the Lion's side. So how he responds to his brothers. He's referred to them pretty affectionately, more than I expected, especially even Leman. I mean, he said he felt sad that he would never see that savage's face again. He referred to Guilliman. He was the only one that was referred to like this, was that frustrating Guilliman. He mentioned all his brothers' names in his head, but he said Guilliman, that frustrating Guilliman. It's like, well, sucks to be you, Lion. That's the one that's still kicking. And it's a good character study. You get to see this cool character, the Lion, being brought back into this universe, learning the ropes again, seeing the universe for how it is. And honestly, I'm looking forward to more. I'd want more stories. Probably one of the things I didn't like about the overall resurrection of Guilliman is that, like, the story was just like beat by beat. There was no story there. And then afterwards, there was very little about him. Most of the story about Guilliman was from excerpts from codexes or the White Dwarf or stuff like that. And then finally, the time when we finally get some good books with Guilliman, it's the Plague War ones, which he's a main character, but he's not the only one. And then he's in a few of the Dawn of Fire books, and that's it. And so far, this one book with a lion is great, but I want more. Alright, I had no issues with this book at all, except that it ended. And so, to find issues, I'll be petty. These aren't really issues, but it's just whatever. So, at the very end, the spiel that Dante gave at the end about the Imperium, the Primaris, the Crusades and stuff to the Lion was... how do I put it? It felt like an advertisement. It felt like an ad about things that are happening. It's like... it was weird and out of place. Just how like this massive info dump just happened in like a few lines, like right after the Lion found out Guilliman lived and wanted to know what was happening. It's just a weird way because it really stood out because of how the pacing and writing of everything else, and this was just like a giant just dump of lore and stuff all of a sudden. When in the past, the other characters who gave lore dumps and stuff, it was more spaced out, it was more conversing back and forth. Yeah. Another thing to nitpick is a Khorne fleet in space. We keep seeing them. I want to see a non-Khorne fleet space battle where the space battle is described. I do know from one of the Dawn of Fire books that there is a... whatchamacallit? What are those things? Word Bearers fleet, but nothing happens. The fleet, what's happening with the Word Bearers fleet is never described. You follow someone else entirely, but the Word Bearers fleet is there. We never get to see it do anything, and every fleet or space battle that we see described tends to be like a Khorne-based one because it's easy to write. All right, and finally, some of the brothers, in the final fight were more shown than others. I've said that before, but like I want to reiterate it. Like I'd like to see some of them, that Shadow Demon, talk more. Conrad got a ton of time, and so kind of interesting that few of them were really shown. Some were shown very little, but then again, it's whatever. The overall place in the universe, this is a major turning point, but it kind of feels like after The Lion came out, after the Arcs of Omen stuff came out, it sort of feels like it's forgotten and off to the side. Okay, sure, 10th edition's coming out. But it's like, I want more. It's like, so what I would expect is like after the book has come out, like an announcement, like in some months or some time, another book is going to come out featuring the Lion and stuff. That's what I want to see. And it's being avoided. It's like, I want to know more. I want to read more, but it's not there. It's not even announced. I mean, even when the Plague War books were coming out, you knew another one would come out. So either way, to rate this book, a 5 out of 5. It was everything I wanted and more, hit every note, scratched every itch, and I want to know more. And I'd like for there to be more books on this. Mike Brooks did a great job. The battles were very clear and distinct. The characterization was very good. Even the Fallen, they had their interesting quirks and stuff. The main bad guy was interesting, and his side characters on that side were interesting. And so... yeah, it was a good book. Nothing really felt lacking. I mean, the mortals were there, but just to be ignored. Yeah, call them mortals. I'm one. The people and stuff were there just for a moment, but they were really just the background characters and stuff, so no real need to focus on them. But, yeah, I just want to know more and have more. This is a book. If you haven't read it, you got to read it because it's really cool. And I want more. I want a sequel or, a continuation, whichever way you want to slice it. And yeah, and that's it for the book review, I believe. Yeah. Alright, so like the video if you like the video, comment if you want to comment, share if you want to share it, and eventually battle reports will come back.